All righty, welcome. I am Heather Pierce Campbell, the legal website warrior. I'm an attorney and legal coach based here in Seattle, Washington, serving online information entrepreneurs throughout the US and the world. Welcome to another episode of Guts, Grit, and Great Business. I am so excited to bring my friend Dawn Andrews on today. Welcome, Dawn.
Hello. So happy to be
Woohoo!
here. Woo woo.
This is going to be fun. So the backstory for Dawn and I is that we met was it in person first? Was it it had to be in person, right? At
I
the
think it was in
event.
person.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that then turned into a mastermind, right? So then we were in a
Yep.
mastermind for a little while, but we were comparing dates, and I think that was back in 2015,
I,
2016. It's
I
been
think you're
6 or
right.
7 years, pre my second child, and obviously quite a few other things in life that have happened since. So this will be a fun little reunion. But for those of you that don't know Dawn Andrews is the founder and CEO of Free Range Thinking, a boutique business strategy consultancy that equips and empowers entrepreneurs to confidently lead their businesses while ensuring future growth, big profits, and happy clients. Dawn is also a keynote speaker and host of the My Good Woman podcast. I hope you will share more about that today, Dawn. She also runs the Female Leadership Accelerator, dedicated to advancing the next generation of female leaders, helping them to deepen their impact on their communities and the world. She is an accomplished trainer and speaker featured on the Oprah Winfrey Network, CBS, and CNN. Dawn, welcome. We are going to have so much fun.
Thank you. I'm ready for it.
Woohoo. So I'd love for you to take us back a little bit in your own story. I want people to hear a little bit more about your roots and the origins of your path into business. Do you mind sharing with us how you got to your level and area of entrepreneurship?
Yes, it is a story of street smarts, frustration, and intuition.
Mm, mm,
So I began my business after I was riffed out, reduction in force, which is
yep,
going on for a lot of people these days.
yep.
I was riffed out of my current position. But prior to leaving, I had looked around to see where I always looked at my advancement in my career at that time by chairs. I would see what chair do I want to sit in next? Which office would I like to sit in next? And that would help drive my curiosity and the steps that I would take and the improvements I would make to be able to move towards the next chair. And at the time of the riff, there were no chairs. Not meaning there
Mm,
wasn't one for me, but there was nothing that excited me, nothing that
mm,
piqued my curiosity. So that was the intuition and frustration part. And I hired an executive coach at the time to review everything, where have I been? What have I
mm.
done? What am I interested in? And I decided that I wanted her job.
You're like, wait a second.
You're like, what? There's my new chair. So I dove
Mm.
into study. I got my master's in organizational development and became a coach and started my practice 22 years ago now.
That's
And
amazing.
and this is the street smarts part.
Mm.
I just started and worked, ready, fire, aim, did
Yep.
things, talked to people, sold some stuff, served some people, figured it out, got better,
Mhm.
found new audiences, found new things that I was excited to deliver, listened to my clients to find out what they were struggling with, and then found ways to become better at helping them with those struggles and each successive struggle after we solved problems. And over the course of 22 years, here we are. And it's been a really fun, twisty, exhilarating ride.
Yep, especially twisty, I can imagine. Um, so, and I know this is obviously a general categorization, right? When I think of you, I think of business building, business leadership. How would you
Yes.
describe the work that you do?
Yeah. So the focus that we have is on business strategy and growth.
Mm.
And the doorway that we go through first is executive leadership. So we are
Mm.
always working with founder level, C level, founder owner level to help them become extraordinary leaders of their own
Mm.
business so that they can grow.
Mhm. What do you find? And I'd love to, I want to dig into some of your even earlier backstory as well, but what do you find is the biggest struggle that most leaders are facing in their businesses? Like when you come in the door, I'm sure there are some situations where it feels like a fire is burning, right? And you have to put out some fires before you can move on to some of the other work. What do you see as kind of those hot issues?
The biggest thing that it's shocking to me sometimes, but what I have found consistently is that it's a lack of understanding of themselves.
Mm,
So, some people will call it leadership style, but people don't understand how they're actually coming off to others. So even if
perceived.
they have great
Mm,
strategy, even if they think they've put together a great meeting structure, even if they've got big goals or plans, they have no idea how their behavior is impacting the rest of the team. And so you can have a leader that even might be producing great results, but if you actually did a 360 with their team is highly dissatisfied. We're in the era of quiet quitting,
yeah.
resentful work. And so leaders are disconnected from who they are, how they're coming off, and then actually connecting with their team and what their team is experiencing.
Mm. It just reminds me like the number of times I've seen posts in the last, let's just call it the last couple years around what skills are going to be most essential in, the next iteration of our economy. It's all
Mm-hmm.
of the soft skills that were ignored for so
Yes.
long in corporations, in bigger businesses, in the marketplace, right? That's what you're
It always
talking about.
cracks me up. That's exactly what I'm talking about. And
Mhm.
it cracks me up. It's it's a bittersweet thing. It's funny to me sometimes, and it's heartbreaking to me sometimes that people forget that business is made up of people.
Right. Well,
Like
it seems
nothing gets done without the people. Like you can go sell all kinds of things to other people, but somebody has to
Mhm.
deliver the product or service that you've just sold, and that's people. So why wouldn't you get good at that?
Oh my gosh, it's so crazy because once you spend time in, and I've spent time inside of large and small organizations, obviously run my own small businesses, and it's all people. The
Hmm.
team building, the sales, the collaboration, like everything. It's so fascinating to me that those things were ever separate, right? The emphasis
Yeah.
on really understand, because business building and like the number of times even on this podcast we've had conversations with people where it's back to the fundamentals every time. It's
Hmm.
relationship building, it's communication, it's listening, it's and it is fascinating how certain people end up repeatedly in leadership positions without having much awareness of self when it comes, and I don't know if you can comment on that. Like, is there a certain personality type that's just attracted to leadership? Is it that it's just the human journey and it's something that we all have to face at some point, right? What is
It,
it?
it's interesting, and I understand how we got here. I think
Mhm,
um, relating to people is complex.
mhm,
It requires effort. It requires nuance and really good listening.
mhm,
And business doesn't reward those particular skills
mm,
directly. It rewards
right.
them indirectly. So when you're looking at a balance sheet and a revenue line, you're looking at numbers which were delivered by people, but you're
Mhm,
only thinking of it in terms of the number. We've disconnected that. And when we think about driving the number, we think about the tactics to get there, but not how we need to relate to people to get them there
that's
and
right.
what
The people
and
skills to get there.
what might
Mm,
motivate different people. And it is a discipline, and it does take time to learn and energy to put into it. But
mhm,
when you are driven by a number, and if you're in a leadership position, there's always some level of fear that's going on and some level of imposter syndrome and concern that's going on. You're going to push away the things that you're not naturally good at and drive towards the
mhm,
things that you are that you think are going to deliver the number. And oftentimes it's the people part that gets pushed away. So
mm.
to answer your question about who ends up in leadership,
Mhm.
because we reward numbers disconnected from people,
Mm.
people who are disconnected from people
Mhm.
tend to progress more quickly in leadership, because there's
Mm.
not an easy way to measure that nuance.
Yeah. It's my sister who's inside of a company. She's in sales, and she's been in sales the last, I don't know, 7, 8 years, and she's phenomenal. She quickly climbs the ranks in any company that she joins, and she also quickly exits because she outgrows her position so fast, right?
Mm,
And
yeah.
always there are significant management issues, and what she finds is just what you've said, right? That companies are looking at numbers, and they will put people in place that understand numbers or maybe achieved good numbers themselves, but don't actually have the leadership skills that it takes to lead a team on that path. And so
Hmm.
these teams are all limited by their management, not by the
Hmm.
salespeople.
Yeah.
And it's just been a really consistent conversation. I mean, I just watch companies everywhere struggle with this very thing.
And it is a big struggle. And I get it. When you
Mhm.
think about, um, there are a lot of other organizations out there that focus on business growth. And
Mhm.
you'll hear them use the words like buttons to push, levers to pull,
Mhm.
that kind of languaging. And for sure, depending upon the kind of business that you're in, there are efficiencies like order more at one time, or
Mhm.
skip, reduce some of the steps in a product delivery process. Like there are functional ways to squeeze more juice out of the orange.
Mhm.
And but then once you've done that, the limitations of growth are sometimes not necessarily about a scaling structure conversation.
Mhm.
They're about finding the right people, putting them in the right spots, and then leading and motivating them well to do well, that can give you a next level of growth beyond just the buttons and the levers.
Mm. This might be a question where you're like, I don't really want to answer it, but I'm going to ask it anyways.
Those are the best questions on a podcast.
Right? Do you ever come across folks where, because I assume we all have, right, a growth path that we're on when it comes to our personal leadership, our capacity for leadership. How often, if ever, do you bump into somebody where you're like, man, they just really should not be in a leadership position because there's not the openness to work on? And I assume if you're getting hired, I mean, probably the top people are hiring you at a company, right? It's one thing if like the owner of a small business, him or herself directly is hiring you and they're
Yeah.
motivated to grow, right? But you have this additional complexity when you're dealing with teams. And I assume some people are motivated for that development and others just are not.
Yeah, and it's true. So what I found so far, and I've worked with thousands of companies,
Mm.
that um, point of view and behavior that you're describing stalls out in the middle.
Mm.
So when it comes to like VP level and above, SVP, EVP, and then when you come to founder owners, if they're hiring me, they're already open. They see
Right.
some need and they want something.
Yep.
And then if they've made it to those senior levels of leadership, they have been effective, and effective to some degree, but at that point it's a performance issue. It's like working with a high level athlete and getting them to elite status.
Yes.
But the
Yeah.
phenomenon you're describing usually stalls out in the middle, and the ones that are not open to improving, they can probably hop from position to position, but not necessarily advance. It feels
Not
like
go up.
advancement because there's a lateral move, but
Yep.
they're not necessarily moving up. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. Um, what what do you love most about your work?
The
And I know
diversity
you've
of
got
people,
variety of facets, right? So I say your work broadly, but you've got a variety of things going on within that. So you said diversity of people.
the diversity of
Mm.
people. So what I find consistently is that the challenges that people are facing are the same,
Mm.
but the people and their unique approach to it and their personalities and their skill sets and their intelligence and their histories is what's so super fascinating to me. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's the variety of that is really fun to work with.
Oh, I bet. And it must be so fun when you see people that you are working with for any length of time, I assume, reach those like aha type of moments of like, oh my gosh.
Popcorn moments. Yes. I
Yes,
love a popcorn moment.
totally. Do you want to describe some of those?
What the ahas are, especially, or what a
Mhm.
popcorn moment is, or both.
What the ahas are, especially that you see.
So there was a CEO that I was working with recently, very effective, like CEO, obviously. So
Mhm.
they're running a multifaceted, complex, large company, and they are in my model of leadership that I develop and work with my clients on. It's vision, alignment, and
Mhm.
execution. Those are
Mhm.
that's the triumvirate. And this person was very good with vision and very good with execution, but the alignment piece wasn't coming together quite the way that she wanted to. That was where we could squeeze more juice out of the orange. And
Uh,
the discovery in that moment was curiosity. Her popcorn moment was if she asked why more often,
mm,
then it would reveal where her team aligned with her way of thinking and her approach to getting things done or didn't. And then that's
mm,
the training opportunity or the doubling back to make sure that the strategy is online in alignment with that person and with that
mm.
particular area. And once she realized that she just needed to listen and ask why, her job became like easily 50% easier because she wasn't
Ugh,
trying to repeat the same stories over and
right.
over again. Like,
Force a
please
square
do it.
peg into a round hole. Yes.
Yeah. It gives you the insight to see where things are going off track and then to correct it.
That was totally a goosebumps moment because I think of how many people at the top feel like they have to have the plan, right? And then it's about
Yeah.
executing the plan.
Yep.
But your people on the ground, your boots on the ground. Like I think of my sister and her sales team. Like if
Yeah.
her manager would just sit down and be like, "You guys, what's working? What's not working? Why is it not working?" Like she would learn so much rather than being like, "Here's what you got to do, go do it," and acting like a military person about it, you know.
Yep.
It's top down marketing strategies on the company level that
Yeah.
also need to be fixed, right? And because these
Precisely.
people are trying to implement it and it's just not working. So, yeah, that piece about just curiosity and listening. And I think a huge part of that is like trusting the team that you've built to bring you
Mm-hmm.
the answers,
Mm-hmm. Well,
right?
people we will go deep and ask questions and be curious about our clients and customers.
Mhm,
We'll do customer research, we'll do market research, we'll, call people in for focus groups,
mhm,
and we'll listen intently because we know that sales demand it and are hinged on whatever that information is, but we don't do that for
mhm,
our teams.
mm,
And it's this like sales demanded and are hinged on that too. It's the complementary piece.
totally. It's, and I obviously and I'd love actually for you to talk about this in relation to some of the because I'm sure you work with, some rather larger companies and larger businesses, but speaking to a group of entrepreneurs that are and let's pretend that you are talking now to a group that are small but they're in the maybe a couple $1 million a year in revenue range. They're building teams, they've got small groups of people that are helping them run that machine.
Mhm.
So it's a different scale but it's still the same concepts. Is there anything different about your work with those smaller teams or is it the same stuff that you're covering?
Same,
Same.
same. Same,
Hmm.
same, which, hopefully can give small business owners some confidence that this is you may be at this particular place, your revenue may have this
Mhm.
many zeros behind it, your team may be this size, but the challenges that you're facing in a smaller subset is like the
Mhm.
nucleus of a team inside a
Yep.
larger organization. It's still
Yep.
the same set of challenges, it's still the same demands of you as a leader.
Mhm.
It's
Yeah.
yeah, not a
Well, and
lot of
that's such
difference
a
there.
it creates actually such a good visual even when you think about larger organizations. Really what they are is a whole bunch of subsets,
Yeah.
right? because
Mm-hmm.
that's how larger organizations have to work. Yeah. It's funny because when I have developed the practice I've developed in my own businesses is, whether I'm talking to 3 members at a time, a single member of my team, it's like, if something's not working, because I'm really good at observing patterns, like, oh, I noticed this has happened a couple times now. Let's sit down and talk about what's going on. And I never I never approach it from the standpoint of a people problem, like, oh, whose fault is this? Or like,
Yeah.
wow, how did that like, I always look at it from a system standpoint, like, oh, okay, let's look at what system we have. How did this break down? Like, what ideas? And I think that, like, my VA in particular, who currently was new to the VA business, she came actually from an education background. And she gave me feedback early on. She was like, the thing that I appreciate about you most is that you're always asking questions about how do we fix the system, right?
Mm-hmm.
Rather than making it a people problem. And at least for me, I have found those conversations to be so much more beneficial and creative than just being like, oh, I see this mistake, you need to fix it or whatever.
Mm.
Right. But understanding it from like, okay, let's fix this. And how do we fix the system moving forward so that it takes this bump out of the road for us. But team members always have great ideas about how to fix it. They're the ones running the systems. They're the ones doing the work on the ground day in and day out, right? I would feel silly being like, oh, here's the fix, and just telling them what to do. Like, yeah, sometimes I have an idea, or what do you think of this? But it feels, honestly, to me, so much more supportive to just ask for the answers and assume that they're probably going to come up with a pretty good one.
Well, chances are they might be doing whatever the thing is a lot better than you do it anyway. And
Totally.
and I appreciate the systems approach that you have. If you would like to receive a bit of coaching, I will give you a little bit of coaching.
Totally.
So
Yes.
the people part to add back into it is to be
Mhm.
curious about what choices they made or what they're thinking or the story they were telling themselves that had them make the choice that had the system go off in a direction
Mhm.
that you didn't want it to go.
Yeah.
Because their thinking still might be sound, but the
Might be
system
relevant.
may need to
Mhm.
have an upgrade or a change.
Mhm.
So and sometimes you're looking for that feedback from them, but you may need to step back one step just to
Yep.
say, okay, this is how that event went.
Mhm.
This is what we collectively has said worked and didn't work about it. Tell me what your thought process was that got to that had us have these parts that didn't go as well as we
Mhm.
had thought.
Mhm.
What was
I
the
love
thinking?
that.
Because nobody goes into it wanting to sabotage a system, wanting an event
No.
to go horribly. Like everybody is, for the most part, is coming in wanting it to go at best
Yeah.
satisfactorily, if not have it turn out in the best way possible. So
Totally.
understanding how
Totally.
people were thinking about it helps
Yeah.
reveal some other places that can help you upgrade your systems.
Yeah. It's like digging under those rocks. Yeah.
Mhm.
No, that's great. What else? So I love the curiosity piece that you mentioned as far as like some of the
The
popcorn
popcorn moment.
moments.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. What else do you find tend to be some of the ahas for people in leadership positions that are, needing some support?
That not everybody thinks the way you do.
Right? Surprise. I know. Bummer. I have such a good way of thinking. Yeah.
It's really phenomenal. I mean, people will hire in their own image. So they will hire for skill set, which is going to show
Say
up
that
on somebody's
again. I know. Hiring
people
in their own
hire in their own
image.
image. Yeah,
Isn't that fascinating?
it
True
is.
story.
And sometimes people will hire, it's like you'll hire somebody you want to go have a beer with, but not necessarily the
Totally.
person that's the right fit for that
Hey, I
role.
like you. We should hang out.
Hmm.
Yes.
And I
Mm.
don't discount the value of having a convivial culture, of having a
Mm.
culture where people are, if
Well
everybody is like
liked
a
and you get
talk over,
along.
yeah, like there's some cultures that I work with, and I was just doing it with you. I'm a talk over people person.
I'm fine
And
with it. Just FYI. Yeah.
okay, good. But some cultures, that's what it's like.
Yeah.
And and if you hire somebody into that culture that's not a talk over person, they may feel like they can't get a word in edgewise. They don't know how
They're
to contribute in
excluded.
meetings. Yeah, they don't connect. They're
Mm.
not in it. I
Mm.
recently worked with a team whose culture was predominantly they work better when they can email communication. Like everybody likes to receive an
Oh.
email, digest it, be able to think it through, analyze, and then return it. But there were a few people in the culture that are a lot more like speak off the cuff, a lot more,
Mhm.
faster pace. They process verbally in the moment.
Yes.
And so there's a big disconnect between these few people that were more like that and the
Mhm.
many that were more in
Mm.
the email camp. And
Yeah.
they're collaborating. So you have to find ways to bridge that gap for people.
Oh, that is such a great example of how different cultures can be within a business, right? And
Hmm.
thinking about it that way, like you actually have a culture in your business, including in your small business. And what does that look like? And are you crafting that carefully? I'm sure a huge part of what you do on the vision side is helping people get to the right version of that rather than just creating one inadvertently.
Yeah, well, there's two parts. So the vision is, the imagined future for your company and or that
Mhm.
division or that set of goals. But and that's its own conversation. But then crafting the culture, like what would this company, how do we do what we do here?
Mhm.
Not how tactically, but like, are we a talk over culture? Are
Or
we a
the
raise our
people
hand in a
side.
meeting
Yeah.
culture? Like how
Mhm.
do we do what we do? That part is it's actually a relatively easy fix for most leaders,
Mm.
especially if you have a professional that you can work with to help you sort that out. But once you
Mm.
have that, then it becomes easier to disseminate the vision, make sure that people got it.
Mhm.
Because again, different learning styles, different professional styles, people intake, like they digest that vision differently depending
Mhm.
upon their styles. And if you know what they are,
Yeah.
then you can just, we were just having this conversation before we started the podcast about diet and which things make us feel better when we eat them and which things don't. Like once you know how people like to consume, then you can feed them
Mhm.
in a way that actually is more effective.
That's so good. On that point, are there tools or exercises that you have a really strong preference for to help people arrive at those understandings, right? Because I know that the marketplace is awash with that stuff.
Yeah, so we over here at Free Range Thinking are devotees
Mhm.
of the DISC program of
Okay.
the DISC process and all of its
Mhm.
different layers. Um, the downside of any of these tools like Myers-Briggs, DISC,
Mhm.
Colby, Strong, there's a million
Yep.
of them.
Yep.
But the downside of them is that organizations, large or small, will take the assessments, read the assessments, maybe have a 1-day training, but they don't actually engage with somebody to help them pull it all through. And they don't see how that information can actually, on a day to day revenue connected way,
Mm.
impact the company if they engage with a longer conversation about it. And so
Yeah.
that's a lot of what we do is to pull it
Oh,
through so that it's
wow.
real.
Well, I mean, you talk about any expert role, like all experts come with like a really important body of knowledge, right? But where does it fall down? The implementation side. We can all
Always.
consume, read, watch, whatever, and then we all struggle in some way or another in one area or more in our lives with the actual implementation of it. And that's where that continued support, having an expert like yourself actually break it down into how you not only understand it, but then utilize it in a way, right, to change the outcome.
For sure. And even if it's just the leader or top level managers that engage in
Mm.
that conversation in an ongoing way, that can have a game changing effect on your whole culture.
Oh, I bet that whole top down, leadership, observation, strategy, like people, it's what was the quote? People don't leave companies, they leave bad managers, right?
Yeah.
So on the
Oh,
flip
yeah.
side, you've got somebody in a management position working really hard to support their people and do it the right way. People will stick around through tough times.
Yeah. And right now,
Mhm.
employee retention is paramount.
Oh my gosh. I won't mention whose company this is. I have somebody relatively close in my life who works at a place that has 40% turnover right now. 40%. And we're talking a company of hundreds of people. I was like, oh,
Oh,
this
that's
is an
heartbreaking. Because think
freaking
about that.
nightmare. Oh, I know. Like, I don't even actually know how they're operable with that
Yeah.
level of turnover.
Yeah. Because at the worst end of it is the functional level, like can we keep the doors open? But
Yeah.
that's knowledge that's walking out the door. That's
Yes.
relationships and connections. That's training and hiring time that has to start over, which
Continuity.
means,
Yeah.
yeah, your executives that are having to fill those slots are not focused on what they're supposed to be focused on.
No, and the people that are left are all doing double duty, like they're spread too thin because they're having to cover all these I mean, it's
Yeah.
anyways, it will be an interesting thing to observe how this goes for them and
Yes.
probably for many companies coming out of this period where there is so much disruption in the marketplace,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? What are you seeing in regards to that? I mean, are the companies that you're working with, is that one of the issues that they're facing is turnover? Is that why they find you and get help or no?
No,
Yeah.
usually when people are reaching out to us, it's they want to find another gear in how their business works. They want to be able to
Mm,
shift into the next gear, and they may recognize that it has something to do with them as the founder owner,
mhm, mhm,
or they may think it's that they've reached some level of growth with what their business model is, that they've
mm,
tapped out what their business model is capable of. It may be that they have just found a little bit of space and they want to think of something like what's next, what's bigger, what's the
mhm.
plan for total world domination.
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Mm,
So usually I like to think of where I'm at. So usually if you think of therapy,
mhm,
people go to therapy often previously. Thankfully, this has changed a lot, to be
yeah.
fair. But it used to be that people would go to therapy because they were in a dysfunctional situation with themselves or with someone else. And they would be in therapy to go from dysfunctional to functional.
Mm,
Thankfully, that is changing, and more people that are in functional places are
are
seeing a
still
therapist.
getting,
Thank
yep.
goodness.
Thank goodness is right.
Yes. Like I'm in it. I love my therapy. Like that's
Mhm,
yes. Um, and I'm usually finding companies that are functional that want that next step.
mhm.
So
Yeah.
occasionally something's on fire when we come in, but usually it's people that are ready for that next level of growth.
I love that. And I also love your focus on female entrepreneurship and
Yes,
leadership
girl.
in particular, right? So, do you want to share with us what you're doing there? I know you've got a podcast that sounds like it's all about women leadership and women led businesses. Do you want to share what's going on there?
Yes. So
Mm,
my greatest passion and commitment is that we have more women in leadership positions across the board everywhere.
hallelujah.
51% is what I would like.
Mm,
And that's in your church. That's in your school
mhm.
district.
On every
That's
board. That's right.
yes.
Mm,
Yes. And I find that we still need help learning to advocate for ourselves, learning to
mhm,
speak up for ourselves, learning to regulate ourselves to be able to see the situation and that we're in and speak to the people that are around us. Like we need a little bit of a polish and an up level on our leadership skills to be able to claim these positions and claim a seat at the
mhm,
table or continue building our own tables.
mhm,
So I have the My Good Women podcast,
mhm.
which is conversations with culture shifting, glass ceiling busting, trailblazing women
Oh, love
that
it.
are leading enterprises that are changing the world.
Mhm.
And it's all about women stepping outside of traditional roles, asking for things that
100%.
people think are too big,
Yep.
calling others to account. That to me is the definition of a good woman. Like if you're
Yeah.
stirring it up, you're a good woman.
Right?
Yes.
It's so true. Oh my gosh, I could go into so many stories on that topic alone. What, where do you see, and I'll just, I mean, for the, obviously it's a broad category. Where do you see women's leadership currently, and where do you see it going, right, in the next 5 to 10 years, especially as it relates to entrepreneurship?
Yeah. So currently we had 40% of women drop out of the workforce related to the
Yeah,
pandemic. Now
right.
that's inside corporate.
Yep.
I feel like in entrepreneurship there has never been a bigger boom or better time for women in entrepreneurship.
Mhm.
We still have a lot of challenges that we're facing. We
Mhm.
are dealing with Like the biggest challenges that I think female founders and
Mhm.
entrepreneurs face is bias, money,
Yeah,
and access.
totally. And
And
childcare, right?
yeah,
I'm gonna throw that one in
yeah,
from personal experience.
I throw that in with the bias piece, right?
Totally.
So,
Mm.
the Pew Research Center has done great studies on women in leadership. The most recent one in 2018, um, put side by side qualities of leadership and how women perform in those qualities, how men do,
Mm.
and then how women are perceived as performing in those qualities and men are perceived. Women beat
Mm.
men in nearly every category with the exception of risk
Mm.
and vision, and that I think is just an interpretation problem personally. But
Yeah.
um so we have the skills, but we still have a majority of men that are in leadership positions
Which
that are
brings with it, I will say, a perception problem, right? When you
yeah.
talk about actual skills and demonstrated performance versus the perception of that. Yeah.
Yes. And that's the bias part of this. And the biggest part of the bias is not even the conscious bias, it's the unconscious bias
That's
part.
right.
It's that there in fact, here I'm just looking at one of the notes that I wrote down because I wanted to share it today. Um 7 out of 10 women say there are too few women in high political office
Mhm.
or in top executive positions. This is from that Pew study.
Yep.
And half of men say the same. So what that says to me is that there's not even an awareness that there's an issue. Not
Mhm.
that there is an active, blocking of women into these
Yes.
positions. It's that there's no awareness that an issue exists to be able
Mhm.
to do something about it.
It's true.
So when it comes to being a female founder, some of it is you're going to be doing some educating.
Mhm. That's right. And I think even for women not in a founder position, right? So even for women in a career position or, any place in the market, I feel like there is a continual opportunity to educate not only peers and colleagues, but management. And
Mhm.
part of it has to be through unfortunately, right, the onus falls on women to lead this conversation and to have it, I think, most of the time, and to demonstrate that it's necessary to have it.
Mhm.
But it is by creating these what are often uncomfortable moments and uncomfortable conversations for other people.
Yep. Well, and this is why I'm such a fan of female founders
Yes. Well,
because
for
oh, go ahead. What were you going to say?
yeah, I know. I get so excited for women on that path. It's often where they just end up naturally, right? They climb and climb or have the difficult conversations or just get to a point of like, you know what? I'm opting out of this whole system thing and I'm just going to go over here and do my thing. And the
Yeah.
number of women that I know that have done that, I mean, good for them. I'm so glad women are doing that and it's not without its hurdles.
Yes. Well, we'll talk about that in a minute, but I have an executive transition mastermind that's happening in May
I
that is
love it.
exactly was designed for that reason.
Uh,
But so bias, money, and access. That's the biggest
yeah.
challenges for founders, female founders in entrepreneurship right now. The money part,
Mhm.
especially unless you're bootstrapping it yourself, there's 2.6% of venture capital goes to female founders,
Mhm.
even less to female founders of color. I mean,
Yeah.
it's abysmal. So, finding alternative funding opportunities, finding opportunities to mentor and mastermind with each other and connect and network with each other.
Mhm.
I just
Mm.
honestly, where I think this is going, Heather, I think in the next decade, we're just going to see a whole new system and paradigm arise that is parallel to what is, eventually either going to change or die off.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think the same is happening in our education systems. I think it's going to happen in our political systems across the board. Our systems are not
Yeah.
working, and this is one of them, right? But it's partly why I love entrepreneurship and also partly why I'm so dedicated to getting the right people, the right support so that they can go create those mission focused, impact driven small businesses that do the important work that they're here to do, right? And
Yeah.
we got to keep going.
Well, I feel like I don't know if you've heard the quote, but the oh God, I'm gonna slaughter it.
It's all right.
The
We're
outer
okay.
the outer The outer conditions of a person's life are harmoniously related to their interior story.
Mm.
So, for instance, if the outside of your house, if you're living in a messy house, chances are you got a messy thought process going on. Like whatever your story is, that's what dictates this environment that you've surrounded yourself with. What's exciting to me about female founders and building these impactful businesses or the entire system that supports the building of female-led impactful businesses, I honestly feel like it's reflective of the future of our democracy. And it gives me hope. So even in the midst of these turbulent times, to me, that's one of those little growing shoots coming up from the ground that has promise. It's a version of delivering on what was promised to us in our Constitution. And women being able to go and start this indicates to me that we're going through it, but we're building something that is better and closer to that vision that we had in mind in the first place.
I love that. That was another goosebumps moment. And I think of businesses, even small businesses, as problem solvers and incubators of change.
Absolutely.
Right? And like from that
And the single
perspective,
largest employer in the United States, by the way.
also true. And I do a lot of talking about those statistics, right? Because they're super relevant even from a legal perspective. But it's that piece, you're right, absolutely should give us hope because I mean, I even now, whatever, 3 years into the pandemic, whatever it's been, the number of women that I know right now that are considering or about to or already have transitions underway, leaving some of these traditional roles into creating their own entirely new thing and new business models that are like these beautiful, brilliant blends of like something that did not exist before, right? Oh, gets the juices flowing. Totally.
Right? It's exciting.
Yeah. It's very exciting. Well, Dawn, I am so thrilled that we got you on the podcast after a handful of years of not being connected. It's so great to hear what you're up to. For folks that are like, gosh, I need to find out more about what Dawn is up to. I need to connect with her or follow her. Tell us a little bit about where you are at online.
Yeah, the fastest way to find me and all the different things that I'm up to, especially related to female founders and to helping founders become CEOs, is dawnandrews.com.
Okay.
And then you can find me on socials. LinkedIn is where a lot of it happens, but to be honest, on the real, I'm usually hiding out on Instagram. I just like pretty pictures. So
me too. As a former
yes.
photographer, I can't help myself. But yes, I love spending time on LinkedIn for the LinkedIn is where I find the people like ready to move. Like, okay,
Yes.
it's the
Yes.
difference between like for Facebook for many years, it was like, oh, can I have this free thing? Can you give me this free advice? Can I, blah, blah, blah. And
Yeah.
LinkedIn is like, how do I hire you already?
Yeah. Let's get her done. Exactly.
Totally. Yes. Well, I love it. We will share all of your links, including your website and your social links over on the show notes page. So folks, jump over and find Dawn and her podcast post at legalwebsitewarrior.com/podcast. Connect with her there. And I highly recommend you do that. Dawn, what final thoughts would you like to leave us with today?
Let's think. I always love the go-to quote that commit, because whatever you commit to and you begin, there's power and magic in it. So begin it now. So whatever that is for you, begin it now.
Oh, it's so true. The power of beginnings, of just getting started. I love that. It's perfect. And here, I know this won't publish until a few months later, but we're recording this at, relatively the start of 2023. So that's perfect. Dawn, thank you so much. I so look forward to being in touch again very soon.
I'm so happy to see you again. Thanks for having me.